When the most powerful man in the world went completely silent for 3 days straight, no posts, no replies, nothing, the entire internet stopped and asked the same question. What could possibly make Elon Musk go quiet? The answer was 47 seconds of audio. Not a scandal, not a lawsuit, not a business decision that shook the markets or a controversy that split the country down the middle. Just a voice, just one man's voice, recorded late at night, alone, in the dark, saying the things that the most powerful man on earth was never supposed to say out loud. And the woman who kept that voice, kept it for 16 years, transferred it carefully from phone to phone, device to device, the way you carry a letter too important to throw away. Her name was Camille Voss. The world had never heard of her. That was entirely intentional. She was not his wife. She was not his business partner. She was not anyone the press had ever photographed or any biographer had ever found. She existed in the space between the public story and the private one. The person he called at 2 a.m. when the rockets were failing and the money was almost gone, and the man who was supposed to have all the answers was crouched in a corner somewhere, running out of air. She was the one who answered, every time, for years, and on one specific night, September 28th. In 2008, when his rocket finally reached orbit for the first time, and the room at SpaceX erupted and grown engineers wept openly, and history was being made in real time, Elon Musk did not celebrate with the crowd. He stepped into a corner. He picked up his phone. He called her. She did not answer. So he left a voicemail. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She has listened to it over 1,000 times since that night. She never told a single person it existed. Until now. What she released stopped people mid-commute. It made a retired school teacher sit in a grocery store parking lot for 40 minutes, unable to go inside. It made a young engineer cry alone in a bathroom stall at work. It made a psychologist who has spent her career studying extraordinary people say, on record to 3 separate publications, that she had never heard anything that sounded so completely, unexpectedly, almost shockingly human. And it made the man himself, the man who built rockets and electric cars and bought the world's biggest social media platform, and who has an opinion about everything, loudly, constantly, publicly, go completely silent for 72 hours, 3 days of nothing, because somewhere in a kitchen in Austin, Texas, a woman named Camille Voss had pressed publish on a plain white page with no photographs and no headlines and no press strategy. Just an audio file and one quiet request. Please listen with kindness. People listened, and then they fell apart. Because what Elon Musk said on that phone, alone, at 11:47 at night, on the greatest night of his professional life, was not what anyone expected. It was not triumphant. It was not the voice of a man who had just conquered something. It was the voice of a man who was terrified that conquering something was all he knew how to do. It was the voice of a man asking, out loud, for the only time anyone has ever recorded, whether any of it was worth it, whether he was. We are going to tell you everything. The woman the world forgot. The years she carried his fear when he couldn't. The night she sat alone in a dark apartment and listened to his voice 11 times before sunrise. The 16 years of silence. The article that called him emotionally hollow. The decision she made at her desk on a Tuesday morning that broke the internet by the following Thursday. And the voicemail. The full transcript. Every word exactly what he said. But you need to understand the whole story first. Because if we just played you the words without the 16 years behind them, you would hear a recording. And we don't want you to just hear a recording. We want you to understand what it cost. Both of them. Stay with us. This is the story the world almost never got to know. Nobody took her picture when the rocket went up. Nobody put her name in the article. Nobody thanked her at the press conference or shook her hand in front of cameras or said, even once, even quietly, she helped build this. Her name was Camille Voss, and the world had absolutely no idea she existed. She grew up in Billings, Montana, in a house where the windows didn't quite seal in February. Cold air came through the corners like the house was breathing. Her father, Gerald Voss, worked at the grain elevator on the edge of town. He smelled like wheat dust when he came home. He wasn't a hard man. He was just a tired one. The kind of tired that settles into a person's bones before they turn 40 and never quite leaves. Her mother, Patrice, worked the night shift cleaning rooms at a hotel on the highway. She left after dinner and came back before sunrise. Some mornings Camille would hear her come in and lie very still in her bed, just listening to the sounds of her mother moving through the house. The tap running, the refrigerator opening, and the soft click of the bedroom door. And she would feel something she couldn't name. Not sadness exactly, something closer to gratitude. The kind you feel when something you love is still there. They weren't poor in the way movies show poor. There was food, there was a television, there were birthdays with cake, but there were also February nights with coats on under the blankets, and the careful way her mother counted change at the grocery store, and the look her parents exchanged sometimes over her head. Just a look, quick and quiet, that meant we'll figure it out. Camille figured things out too. That was her gift. She read everything the school library had. She finished it, actually finished it, every shelf, by age 14. The librarian, a soft-spoken woman named Mrs. Elara Fitch, started ordering books specifically for her. Science books first, then physics, and then aerospace engineering textbooks that were clearly meant for adults, and that Camille read cover to cover with a dictionary beside her, looking up every word she didn't know, which at first was almost every word. She won a partial scholarship to a university in California at 17. She paid the rest herself. Loans, waitressing double shifts, the particular stubbornness of a girl from Montana who had decided the coal was not going to be the biggest thing she ever felt. She graduated in 2001 with a degree in aerospace engineering and moved to San Jose, where a small aeronautics firm hired her to work on fuel systems. The work was quiet and precise, and she was extraordinarily good at it. She lived alone. She cooked simple meals. She went on occasional dates that led nowhere interesting. She was happy in the way that self-sufficient people are happy, completely and without knowing what she was missing. She was 29 years old, during her life was perfectly contained. Then came the spring of 2003. The conference was held in San Francisco, in a hotel with high ceilings and carpet the color of old money. It was the kind of industry event where everyone already knew everyone and talked in circles of careful language and said nothing too bold, because bold ideas got you laughed at in rooms like this. Camille was sitting near the back of a breakout session on reusable launch systems. She had her notebook open. She was the only person in the room taking handwritten notes, which is the kind of detail that means nothing and also means everything. A man sat down next to her. He didn't say hello. He didn't look at her. He just sat down, glanced at the speaker at the front of the room and said, flat, almost bored, like he was thinking out loud, "Everyone in this room thinks small. Do you think small?" Camille looked up. Elon Musk was 31 years old. He had sold 2 companies. He had started a rocket business that the entire industry thought was a spectacular joke. He looked like a man who had not slept since Tuesday and had made peace with that fact entirely. His shirt was slightly wrinkled. His eyes were absolutely awake. Camille looked at him for a moment. "I don't know yet," she said. "I haven't had the chance to find out." He turned and looked at her. Really looked. The kind of looking that most people don't do because it requires actual attention. "That," he said quietly, "is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 6 months." They missed the entire conference. They found a corner table in the hotel bar and talked for 4 hours straight about propulsion systems and childhood and what it means to want something so badly it stops feeling like a want and starts feeling like a wound. He was not charming in the way that handsome men are charming. He was something rarer, genuinely curious. He asked her questions and then actually listened to the answers, which Camille later said felt so unusual it was almost disorienting. She drove home to San Jose that night with the windows down and the radio off. She didn't know what had just happened, but something had. Over the next 2 years, their paths kept crossing. Conferences, technical meetings, a consulting role that Marcus Webb, Elon's quiet and watchful chief of staff, was arranged with a careful casualness that suggested it was not entirely accidental. Camille helped solve a fuel injection problem that had been stalling SpaceX's Falcon 1 development for months. She solved it in 11 days. She was never credited publicly. She never asked to be. But at night after the work was done, Elon would call, and they would talk about failure, about fear, about fathers who were tired and mothers who worked nights, and the particular loneliness of being someone who sees things differently than everyone around them. He told her things she suspected he told no one else. She told him things she had never said out loud before. She did not fall in love with him all at once. It was slower than that and more honest. It happened the way understanding happens, gradually and then completely. One evening in late 2005, so she sat alone in her apartment watching a grainy video someone had posted online of a rocket engine test. She had worked on that engine. Her calculations were inside that machine. The sound of it, massive, controlled, clean, came through her laptop speakers and filled her small kitchen. She watched the flame. She felt something rise in her chest that she could not name and did not try to. She was, in this moment, without knowing it, the happiest she would ever be. There is a particular kind of relationship that has no name, not a friendship, not a romance, something that lives in the space between those two words, in the quiet hours, in the phone calls that start at midnight and end when the sky outside begins to go gray. Something built not from grand gestures, but from the slow accumulation of being known, truly known, by another person. That was what Camille Voss and Elon Musk had, and for a long time, she told herself that was enough. By 2006, the world was beginning to watch him differently. SpaceX had launched its first rocket. It had failed. Then they launched again. It failed again. The press, which had once written about him with the breathless excitement reserved for men who sell companies for hundreds of millions of dollars, began sharpening its language. Words like reckless started appearing. Words like delusion. Tesla was burning money. The Roadster was behind schedule. Suppliers were nervous. Investors were asking questions that had no comfortable answers. Elon was not sleeping. Camille knew this not because he told her. He rarely admitted anything as vulnerable as exhaustion directly, but because of the timestamps on his calls. 2:14 in the morning, 3:47. Once, on a Tuesday in November, 4:59 a.m., when the sky outside her window was just beginning to go from black to the particular deep blue that comes right before dawn. She always answered. She never asked why he was awake. She understood that the question would embarrass him, and she was not interested in embarrassing him. She was interested in keeping him talking because she had learned that as long as he was talking, he was still okay. The second stage separation failed because we underestimated the slosh dynamics, he said once at 2 in the morning, in the flat voice of a man describing a car accident he had survived but not yet processed. We knew there was a risk. I thought we'd modeled it correctly. I was wrong. What do you do with that? Camille asked. A long pause. You fix it, he said. You go back in and you fix it, and you don't let yourself think too long about what it cost. And if you can't fix it, another pause. Longer this time. I don't let myself think about that either, he said. She understood this. She also understood it was not entirely healthy, but she was not his therapist. She was the person he called at 2 in the morning. And she had quietly decided that the most useful thing she could do, the most honest, most loving thing, was simply to stay on the line. It was Marcus Webb who first said out loud what Camille had been feeling for months. Marcus was not a rocket scientist. He was not an engineer. He was the kind of man who understood organizations the way some people understand weather. Instinctively, from long observation, able to feel the pressure changing before anyone else noticed the clouds. He had worked for Elon since 2004, managing the layers of complexity that surrounded a man trying to run 2 revolution-level companies simultaneously, and he was very good at his job precisely because he never pretended things were fine when they weren't. He and Camille met for coffee on a Wednesday afternoon in Hawthorne, a place near the SpaceX facility, a diner with plastic menus and excellent pie, and Marcus set down his cup and looked at her with the direct, careful expression of someone who has been rehearsing what they're about to say. He's not sleeping, Marcus said. Not really. 2-3 hours a night. He had a panic attack in the middle of a board meeting last Tuesday. Camille felt something tighten in her chest. What did he do? Told everyone the projector had broken. Walked out. Came back 8 minutes later like nothing happened. Marcus shook his head slowly. Nobody said a word. Everyone just let him. Because they're afraid of him, Camille said. Because they need him, Marcus corrected gently. There's a difference, and I think he knows it, and I think that might be the loneliest thing in the world. To be needed by everyone and known by no one. Camille looked down at her coffee. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Marcus was watching her face, and he saw what was there. Does he know you're telling me this? She asked finally. Like, no. Then why are you? Marcus picked up his cup. He looked out the window at the gray California afternoon. The parking lot, the traffic, the ordinary Tuesdayness of the world continuing without drama outside. Because he doesn't ask for help, he said quietly. He never has, and I think someone needs to give it anyway, whether he asks or not. And you're the only person I know who can do it without him feeling like he's lost something by accepting it. She drove home slowly that afternoon. She thought about the word Marcus had used, lonely. She turned it over in her mind like a stone, looking at it from different angles, testing its weight. She had always thought of loneliness as something that happened to people who were alone. But Elon was surrounded by engineers, executives, investors, journalists, the constant machinery of enormous ambition. And yet, she picked up her phone that evening. She almost called him. She put the phone back down. She picked it up again. Oh, she sat like that, phone in hand on the edge of her couch, for a long time. Then the phone lit up in her hand, his name on the screen. She answered before the second ring. Hey, he said. His voice was flat and tired and trying not to show it. Hey, she said back. A pause. Third launch is in 11 months, he said. If this one fails, it won't, she said. You don't know that. No, she agreed. But I know you, and I know what you do when something matters to you. Another long pause. What do I do? He asked. And the question was so simple, so genuinely asked, not rhetorical, not performative, that it stopped her completely. He really wanted to know, as though he needed someone outside himself to tell him who he was when things got hard. She thought about it carefully. You stay, she said. No matter what it costs, you always stay. The silence on the line stretched out soft and long. Yeah, he said finally, very quietly. Yeah, I do. She listened to him breathe for a moment. Get some sleep, she said. I'll try. He didn't. She knew he wouldn't, but the call ended gently, and that was something. The months moved forward the way difficult months do, slowly while you're inside them, fast in memory. The third launch came. It failed. The fourth launch was scheduled. The company's survival depended on it. Elon made the decision. Quiet, absolute, devastating in its personal cost. To pour every last dollar of his personal reserves into keeping SpaceX and Tesla alive. Everything he had, everything he'd earned, all of it. Camille heard about the decision from Marcus, not from Elon. She sat with it for a long time. She thought about a boy who had grown up far away, in a country at the bottom of the world, who had looked at the sky and decided it was not a ceiling, but a beginning. She thought about all the nights on the phone, all the timestamps, all the things said and unsaid in the dark. She thought, if this fails, it will break him in a way nothing else has. She thought, I won't be able to fix that. She thought, I would try anyway. September 28th, 2008 arrived the way important days always do, looking exactly like any other day until it isn't. Camille was in her apartment in Hawthorne. She had not been invited to the launch event. She made tea she didn't drink. She opened her laptop and found the live stream and sat cross-legged on her couch with a blanket over her shoulders, like a person bracing for weather. The rocket rose. It kept rising. The flight director's voice broke open with emotion. The room at SpaceX erupted, and Camille Voss sat alone in her apartment and pressed both hands flat against her chest, as if trying to hold something in that was trying very hard to come out. She was not crying from joy. She understood. Right then, in that moment, completely and without any room for argument, that this was an ending. That the man who had called her at 2 a.m, who had asked her, what do I do when it costs too much, who had needed someone to tell him who he was when things got hard, That man was about to become something so large, so public, so permanently lit, that there would be no shadows left for what they had. She closed the laptop. She sat in the dark. At 11:47 p.m., her phone lit up. Oh, a voicemail notification. She stared at it for 4 minutes. Then she pressed play. There are moments in a person's life that split time in half, before and after. Not the big public moments, not the weddings or the graduations or the things you frame and hang on walls. The real ones, the ones that happen in private, in the dark, in the particular silence of a room where no one else will ever know what just occurred. For Camille Voss, this was one of those moments. She pressed play, couldn't, and then she stopped breathing. Not dramatically, not the way people stop breathing in movies, gasping, clutching things. She just forgot. For a few seconds, the simple automatic act of drawing air simply did not happen because every available part of her was pointed at the sound coming through the phone pressed against her ear. His voice. She had heard it hundreds of times, in meetings, on calls, across diner tables and conference rooms, and once, memorably, absurdly, at 2 a.m. from a parking lot outside a machine shop where he had been personally welding something because the welder they'd hired had gone home and the part needed to be done by sunrise. She knew his voice the way you know a place you've lived in for a long time, the particular rhythm of it, the way it slowed when he was thinking hard, the way it flattened when he was trying not to feel something. This voice was neither of those things. This voice was something she had never heard from him before. She listened. She did not move. Outside her window, the ordinary world continued. A car passing, a dog somewhere distant, the low hum of the city doing what cities do, regardless of what is happening inside the quiet apartment stacked within them. None of it reached her. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that existed only in the 4 minutes and 12 seconds of that recording. When it ended, she took the phone away from her ear and looked at the screen. Voicemail, 4:12, Elon M. She pressed play again. She listened to it 11 times before dawn. Each time she heard something different, not because the words changed. They didn't. They were fixed, permanent, already past. But because she was different each time she listened. The first time she heard it, she heard shock. The second time, grief. The third time, something she could not name that lived somewhere between love and loss and gratitude, and the particular ache of understanding a person so completely that their pain lands in you like it is your own. By the 11th time, she was sitting on the kitchen floor. She did not remember moving from the couch. She was simply there, back against the cabinet, knees pulled up, half phone in both hands, with the recording playing into the silence of her kitchen and the first gray light of morning beginning to show at the edges of her window. Orbit, her cat, years away from existing, a comfort she had not yet found, was not there. There was nothing soft in the room, just the hard floor and the hard light and the voice of a man who had built a machine that reached space telling her, in the dark, what it had cost him. She did not call him back. She knew, with the certainty of someone who understood him deeply and honestly, that calling back was not what he needed. He had not left the voicemail because he wanted a conversation. He had left it because he needed to say the words out loud to someone, needed to release them into the world, into the ear of the one person he trusted to hold them carefully. And then he needed to go back to being the person the world required him to be. She understood this. She hated it a little. She understood it anyway. She made coffee at 6 a.m. She stood at her kitchen window and watched the street below come slowly alive. A man walking a dog, a woman in scrubs heading to an early shift, a kid on a bicycle moving fast through the pale new light like he had somewhere urgent to be. She thought about Gerald Voss, her father, who smelled like wheat dust and came home tired every evening. She thought about Patrice, her mother, who moved through the house before sunrise, making small sounds that meant I'm still here. We are still okay. She thought about Mrs. Alara Fitch, ordering aerospace textbooks for a 14-year-old girl in Montana who had run out of things to read, who believed without being asked that the girl was worth the effort. She thought about all the people who hold other people together without ever being thanked for it, without ever being seen. She thought, that is what I have been. That is what I am. And then she thought with a clarity that surprised her with its gentleness, that is enough. It was enough. It counted even if no one counted it. She drank her coffee. She did not cry again. She went to her desk, opened her laptop, and began writing an email to a firm in Portland, Oregon that had reached out 3 months earlier about a consulting position. She had not responded. She had been waiting, she realized now, for something to resolve itself, not for some version of the future to make itself clear. It had. She typed the email. She kept it professional. She said she was interested, that she was ready, that she could start in the new year. She pressed send. Then she closed the laptop, went to her bedroom, lay down on top of the covers in her clothes and slept. Finally, deeply, completely, for the first time in what felt like weeks. She did not delete the voicemail. She was not sure in those early days why she kept it. But it was not a conscious decision exactly, more like an inability to make the opposite one. Deleting it felt like erasing a record of something that deserved to be preserved, not for anyone else, just for the integrity of what it was. It had happened. He had said those things. In the dark at 11:47 p.m., on the night his rocket reached orbit and the world cheered, and he stood in a corner and felt something no one around him was equipped to receive. He had called her. He had chosen her voice. Her ear, her particular quality of attention. That was real. Whatever else was uncertain, and much was uncertain. Much was painful. Much would remain forever unresolved. That was real. She transferred the voicemail file to her laptop before she left for Portland. Then she saved it to a hard drive. She would transfer it again, manually and carefully, through 5 phone upgrades over the next 16 years. Carrying it from device to device like a letter in a language only 2 people had ever spoken. She never told anyone it existed. She never played it for anyone. She carried it the way you carry certain memories. Not because they make you happy, but because they are true, and truth is worth the wait. Outside, the morning had fully arrived. Somewhere across the city in a building full of people who were cheering and crying and calling their families, a man was standing quietly in a corner. She knew this without being there. She knew it the way you know certain things about certain people after years of careful attention. She hoped someone had brought him water. She hoped he had eaten something. She hoped that in the morning, in his morning, whenever it came, he would feel the thing he had built. Not the press release version of it, not the historic achievement version, the real version, the human version. I was terrified, and I stayed anyway, and it worked. She hoped he would let himself feel that. She suspected he wouldn't. She loved him anyway. For the last time, quietly, completely, and entirely without expectation. She loved him, and then she let it go. 16 years is a long time. Long enough for rockets to become routine. Long enough for a man to become a myth. Long enough for a woman to build an entirely new life out of the wreckage of a feeling she never fully named and never fully buried. Long enough, but not quite long enough, to forget. Portland came first. Camille arrived in January 2009 with 2 suitcases, a hard drive, and the particular lightness of someone who has made a clean decision and is not yet sure whether it was brave or simply necessary. The consulting firm was small, 8 people in a converted warehouse space near the river. And the work was good, precise, demanding in the right ways. She was grateful for demanding. Demanding left no room for the other thing. She made a friend, a structural engineer named Delia Okafor, sharp-tongued and generous in equal measure, who brought homemade jollof rice to the office on Fridays and had strong opinions about everything from load-bearing calculations to the correct way to brew tea. Delia never asked too many questions about Camille's past. She seemed to understand, with the instinct of someone who had also relocated herself from a previous life, that some histories are not abandoned, but simply set down for a while, placed carefully in a corner while you get on with living. They ate lunch together most days. It was, Camille later said, exactly what she needed. She moved to Denver in 2014, a bigger firm, better pay, A one-bedroom apartment with a window that faced west, and which meant every evening the sky performed. Orange and pink, and sometimes a deep arterial red that made her stand at the glass with her hands around a mug and simply watch. She adopted a cat, gray, serious-faced, mildly contemptuous of affection in the way that certain cats are. She named him Orbit. The name made her smile every time she said it, a private joke shared between herself and a version of herself that no longer quite existed. She dated occasionally. A structural engineer named Patrick for 8 months. Kind, steady, ultimately not quite right in a way neither of them could precisely define. A landscape architect named Soren for a few months after that. Funny, warm, gone before winter. She was not heartbroken by either ending. She was honest enough with herself to understand what that meant and disciplined enough not to dwell on it. She was not miserable. This is important to say clearly, because the easy version of this story would make her miserable, would make the 16 years a long gray waiting room, a life lived in the suspension. That would not be true, and it would not be fair to her. She was alive. She was competent. She had friends, good work, a cat, a west-facing window. She laughed genuinely and often. She hiked trails on weekends and read novels in the evenings, and called her father on Sundays until Gerald Voss passed quietly in the spring of 2017. And after that, she called her mother instead. And those calls were long and warm and full of the particular tenderness that exists between two women who have survived the same loss. But there was a but. There is always a but in the lives of people who carry things. She followed his life from a distance. Not obsessively, she was too honest and too disciplined for obsession, but steadily, the way you follow the weather in a city you used to live in. Cash with a kind of low-grade continuous awareness that you don't always notice until someone asks and you realize you know exactly what has been happening there. She watched him divorce, remarry, make decisions that the world debated furiously for weeks, that she observed with the quiet, particular knowledge of someone who understood the engine underneath. She watched him become a symbol, enormous, contested, impossible to look at neutrally. For some people, he was the future arriving ahead of schedule. For others, he was a warning about what happens when singular ambition is given unlimited resources and insufficient friction. She didn't weigh in. She never spoke publicly. When journalists found her, twice in the early years before she became genuinely unfindable, she said nothing beyond, "I worked in aerospace for a while. I don't have anything interesting to add." They moved on. The world moved on. It always does. Because she moved to Austin in 2019. A small house this time. Not an apartment. An actual house with a yard that she did not garden but appreciated in principle, and a porch where she drank her morning coffee and watched the neighborhood come awake. Orbit relocated with full dignity, surveying the new territory with the measured approval of a cat who has learned that change is survivable. Marcus Webb called every few months. He had left SpaceX in 2011, built a consulting firm of his own, and navigated the years with the same quiet watchfulness he had always possessed. He never pushed. He never asked the questions she could feel him not asking. He talked about his kids, 2 daughters, a son, about projects, about the industry, about ordinary things. The calls were comfortable. They were the calls of 2 people who share a particular piece of history and have agreed, without discussing it, to carry it together lightly. She was grateful for Marcus in the way you are grateful for people who knew you during a chapter that no one else witnessed. Then, in February of 2024, he sent a message. Not a call, a message, which meant it was something he had thought about before sending. "Have you seen what's been written about him this week?" She hadn't. She looked it up. The piece was long and extensively reported and written with the particular confidence of journalism that believes it has found the definitive truth about a person. It called him emotionally hollow. It quoted former colleagues, former friends, former employees. It built a careful, well-sourced case for the conclusion that Elon Musk had never in his life demonstrated genuine vulnerability, that the capacity for it simply was not there. That the man who had built rockets and cars and satellites and social media platforms was, at his core, a closed system. Brilliant, powerful, and fundamentally unable to feel things the way ordinary people feel things. Camille read it twice. She sat with it for a long time. Then she got up, went to her desk, opened the drawer where she kept the hard drive, and plugged it into her laptop. She found the file. She put her headphones on. She listened. His voice came through, tired, unsteady, reaching across 16 years like a hand extended in the dark. And she sat very still and let it reach her. When it finished, she took the headphones off and looked at the window. The Austin afternoon was gold and ordinary outside. A child somewhere was laughing. A lawnmower hummed 2 houses down. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "You read it," he said. Not a question. "Yes," she said. A pause. "Cam, he deserves to be known," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it had no uncertainty in it. "Not the way they're writing about him, the real way, the true way. If you release it, I know. It will be everywhere. They'll come after you. They'll make it into something it isn't. I know that too." Another pause, longer. "Then why?" Marcus asked. She thought about Gerald Voss, who came home tired every night and never asked for recognition. She thought about Patrice moving through the house before sunrise. She thought about Mrs. Alara Fitch ordering books for a girl the system had already half forgotten. She thought about people who do real things that no one ever records. "Because someone has to say it," she said simply. "He was human once. He was scared once. He called someone in the dark and said, 'I don't know if I am enough,' and that matters. It matters that it happened. Wait, it matters that someone says so." Orbit jumped onto the desk and sat beside the hard drive with the solemn gravity of a cat who has decided this moment is significant. Camille looked at him. Then she looked back at the window. "He deserves to be known," she said again, quietly, finally, as though she had been waiting 16 years to say it out loud and was only now understanding that was exactly what she had been doing. She did not make a production of it. There was no press conference, and no publicist, no carefully timed media strategy built by people in expensive offices who understood news cycles and social media algorithms, and the precise art of controlling a story before it controls you. Camille Voss sat at her desk in Austin, Texas, on a Tuesday morning in March 2024, with Orbit asleep on the windowsill behind her and a cup of coffee going cold at her elbow. And she uploaded an audio file to a simple public page she had built herself the night before. And it took 11 minutes to set up. It took 16 years to decide. The page was plain, white background, no photographs. Just the audio file, a play button, and beneath it a short paragraph of text written in the same direct, unadorned way Camille approached everything. It read, "My name is Camille Voss. I worked in the aerospace industry from 2001 to 2012. I am not writing this to harm anyone or to reopen anything that is closed. I am writing this because I read something recently that said a certain person is incapable of vulnerability. I have held a piece of evidence to the contrary for 16 years. I believe the truth deserves to exist somewhere that isn't just inside me. Please listen with kindness. That is all I ask." She read it over once. She pressed publish. Then she closed her laptop, put on her coat, and went for a walk. She walked for 2 hours. She went through the neighborhood and down toward the creek trail and back again, past the coffee shop on the corner and the elementary school where children were arriving in the particular beautiful chaos of morning drop-off. Backpacks too large for their bodies, parents crouching down for last-second hugs, a teacher at the gate with the patient expression of someone who has learned to love mornings regardless of what they contain. She did not check her phone. She came home, fed Orbit. He made fresh coffee and sat on the porch. At some point, she would later estimate it was around the 3-hour mark, her phone began to vibrate with a frequency and persistence that was categorically different from normal. Not the occasional buzz of messages, something continuous, something that meant the upload had found its audience. She turned the phone face down on the porch railing. She finished her coffee. She watched a pair of birds argue over something in the yard with the passionate commitment of creatures for whom this dispute was the most important thing in the world. She breathed. By that evening, the numbers had become impossible to comprehend in any human way. 200,000 shares in the first 6 hours. By midnight, not of her post, which remained plain and quiet on its simple page, but of the audio itself. It's clipped and reposted and embedded in articles and quote tweeted and stitched into videos and sent in private messages between people who wanted someone they knew to hear it. The number had passed 4 million. The media response was immediate and divided and very loud. Half of it was exactly what Marcus had warned her about. Headlines that used words like bombshell and leaked and exposed. Language designed to generate heat, to suggest scandal. To package the audio as ammunition in the ongoing cultural war over what Elon Musk was or wasn't, had or hadn't, deserved or didn't. These pieces were written fast and read fast and shared fast by people who had not actually listened to the recording, but had read the headline and decided they already knew what it meant. The other half was slower, more careful, written by people who had pressed play and sat with what they heard and needed time before they could figure out what to say about it. And these pieces were different in tone in the way that candlelight is different from a flashlight. Less bright, more illuminating. The one that cut through everything, the one that would ultimately define how the story was remembered, was written by Priya Solano. Priya was 34 years old and wrote about technology and culture for a publication that prided itself on taking time. She had been in the industry long enough to be skeptical of most things and young enough to still be genuinely moved by the ones that earned it. She had listened to the voicemail 4 times before she began writing. She had then closed her laptop, made dinner, put her daughter to bed, and sat in the quiet of her kitchen for an hour before she opened it again. Her piece was published 18 hours after Camille's upload. The headline read, "We built a god out of a man who was terrified." It opened not with a summary of the audio or a description of Elon Musk's career, but with a single question. When did we decide that the people building the future were not allowed to be afraid of it? It went on from there, carefully, honestly, with a particular grace of writing that is not trying to win an argument, but to understand something. She did not reveal the contents of the voicemail in detail. She described only what it felt like to listen to it. She described the quality of the voice, the pauses, the way the sentences stopped and started like a person navigating language they did not normally use because they were trying to say something that did not have an established root. She wrote, "I have covered this industry for a decade. I have read 10,000 press releases and sat through 100 earnings calls and interviewed more founders than I can count. I have never heard anything that sounded as much like a real human being as this recording does. And that should not be as shocking as it is. The piece was read 6 million times in 48 hours. Elon Musk said nothing. This was, in its own way, the loudest thing that happened. For 36 hours, an eternity by his standards, a man for whom social media was a daily and sometimes hourly practice, every platform where he existed went quiet. No posts, no replies. With no responses to the journalists who reached out to his representatives and received only a terse no comment that itself became a headline. The silence was interpreted in 100 different ways by 100 different people. Camille interpreted it in only one. She knew him. She knew what his silence meant. On the second night she found the photograph. She had not taken it out in years. It lived in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. Not hidden, just stored. The way you store things you are not ready to display, but cannot bring yourself to discard. She set it on the kitchen table under the light and looked at it for a long time. A rocket on a launch pad, first Falcon one. The photograph taken some time before the 4th launch, before the night that changed everything. The rocket impossibly white against a dark sky, trailing ground support equipment like a dressed wound, a full of fuel and ambition, and the accumulated hope of everyone who had believed when believing was genuinely difficult. On the back, in handwriting that was not hers, 4 words and a date. She turned it over and read them again. She had read them so many times the paper had softened at the edges from handling. She set the photograph down. She looked at orbit, one who looked back at her with the ancient, unreadable patience of a creature that has decided all human emotion is worth witnessing, even if none of it is worth rushing. Almost, and she told him quietly, almost time. The thing about a recording that breaks people open is this. It doesn't break them all in the same place. It finds the crack that was already there, the specific, personal, a private fracture that each person has been quietly carrying. and it moves through that exact spot like water, finding the one gap in a wall. Different people, different cracks, same flood. This is what happened to the world when it listened. Renata Howell was 61 years old and lived in Akron, Ohio. She had been a sixth-grade science teacher for 32 years. She had retired 8 months earlier, following the death of her husband Clifford, a gentle, large-handed man who had repaired small engines in their garage on weekends and made terrible puns at dinner and held her hand during every difficult thing, including his own dying, with a steadiness she still could not fully comprehend or accept. She heard about the voicemail from her daughter, who sent her the link with no explanation beyond a single text that said, "Mom, listen to this. Trust me." Renata listened in her car in the parking lot of a grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon. She did not go inside the store. She sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes. When she finally posted about it, on a Facebook account she used mostly to share photographs of her garden, she wrote with the slow, careful grammar of someone who chooses words because they matter. "I lost my Clifford last year. He was not a famous man. He fixed engines and grew tomatoes and loved me for 38 years. But I know what it sounds like when a man is trying to hold himself together and running out of hands. I heard it in those last months with my Clifford. I heard it again in this recording. I don't care who the man is or what he has built. I care that someone kept this. I care that someone thought it was worth keeping. Because it was. Because he was. Because we all are." The post was shared 40,000 times. Jerome Achebe was 27 years old and worked as a propulsion engineer at an aerospace firm in Houston. He had grown up in Lagos, moved to the United States at 19 on an academic scholarship, and spent the better part of a decade working toward the industry he had dreamed about since he was a boy, watching documentaries about space on a television with a broken color dial that rendered everything in shades of gray and gold. He listened to the voicemail during his lunch break, was sitting alone in a bathroom stall because the break room was too loud, and he had learned that certain things required privacy to be properly received. He sat in there for a long time after it ended. He was not embarrassed about crying. He had learned, from his mother, a woman of extraordinary emotional intelligence who believed that feeling things completely was a form of strength rather than its absence. That tears were simply the body's way of confirming that something real had just happened. Something real had just happened. He typed a post from his phone before he went back to his desk. "I work in this industry because of what this man built. I have spent years thinking of him as something beyond human, a benchmark, a standard, on an argument for what's possible. This recording reminded me that he built all of it while being terrified, that the terror was there the whole time, that it didn't stop him, and he didn't pretend it wasn't there. Not to this woman, not in this moment. I needed to hear that today. I needed to hear it more than I knew." A psychologist named Dr. Vivian Marshall, who specialized in high-performance individuals and the psychological cost of extraordinary ambition, was interviewed by 3 separate publications in the 48 hours following the upload. She said largely the same thing to each of them, in slightly different words, with the patient repetition of someone who has been trying to explain something important for a long time and is finally being asked, "We have constructed a cultural story around exceptional achievers that strips them of the right to be afraid. We reward the result and erase the process. And the process, the actual human interior experience of attempting something that might destroy you, is where all the real information lives." This recording is significant not because it reveals something scandalous. It's significant because it reveals something ordinary. A frightened person, in the dark, reaching for someone. That's not a flaw in the story of this man's success. That's the most important part of it, and we almost never got to hear it. Marcus Webb gave one interview. He had not planned to. He had spent the first 48 hours watching from a distance with the careful stillness of a man who understands that some situations require patience before they require participation. But he read Renata Howell's Facebook post. He read Jerome Achebe's words. He read Dr. Vivian Marsh 3 times. And something in him that had been waiting quietly for a very long time decided it was ready. He called Priya Solano directly. He spoke for 20 minutes. He asked that most of it remain off the record, and she honored that without question. What he allowed her to print was this: I worked alongside this man for 8 years. I saw things that no press release will ever capture and no biography will ever fully reach. Camille Voss is the only person I ever knew who understood him in the way that actually mattered. Not what he was constructing, but why he was so deeply afraid it wouldn't work. She kept that recording because it was true. Why she released it because the truth was being buried under a version of him that left out the most important part. She did it because she loved him, not romantically, or not only that. She loved him the way you love someone whose fear you have witnessed and chosen to stay beside anyway. That kind of love doesn't ask for anything back, but it deserves to be seen. Elon Musk remained silent. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. His representatives confirmed he was aware of the recording. Sooner they offered nothing further. The world waited. Camille did not wait. She already knew what his silence meant. She had always known what his silence meant. There was only one thing left now. One thing the world had been waiting for since the first chapter of this story. One thing that Camille had held for 16 years like a coal. Warm in her hands, occasionally burning, never once dropped. The voicemail itself. What he actually said. In his own voice on the night the rocket flew. When the world cheered and he stepped into a corner and picked up his phone and called the one person who had ever really known him. Tomorrow, Priya Solano would sit across from Camille Voss in a kitchen in Austin, Texas. Tomorrow, Camille would read the transcript out loud for the first time. Tomorrow, the world would finally hear. Priya Solano drove to Austin on a Thursday morning. She had conducted hundreds of interviews in her career. She had sat across from founders and scientists and politicians and people who had survived things that most people could not imagine surviving. She knew how to enter a room with the right kind of quiet. She knew how to make her presence small enough that the person across from her forgot, at least partially, that they were being recorded. She had never been as nervous as she was driving down Camille Street. She parked. She sat in the car for a moment. She looked at her recorder, her notebook, tied it with a list of questions she had prepared and suspected she would not need. She got out of the car and knocked on the door. Camille answered before the second knock. She was wearing a plain gray sweater and dark jeans and no jewelry except small gold studs in her ears that caught the morning light when she moved. She looked, Priya would later write, exactly like what she was, a woman of substance who had long ago stopped performing anything for anyone. "Come in," she said. Coffee's made." The kitchen was warm and full of afternoon light that came through a south-facing window and laid itself across the table in a long gold rectangle. Orbit was already installed in the center of this rectangle, asleep with the absolute commitment of a creature that has claimed the best available warmth and dares the world to argue. They sat across from each other with mugs between their hands. Priya set her recorder on the table. Camille looked at it for a moment, then she nodded. Priya pressed record. They talked for 40 minutes before they reached it. Camille spoke about the consulting work, about Portland, about Denver, about the west-facing window that performed every evening. She spoke about her father, Gerald, the wheat dust, the Sunday calls that continued with her mother after he was gone. She spoke about Delia Okafor and her jollof rice. She spoke about Orbit, Warna, who had relocated through 3 cities with the portable dignity of a cat, who understands that home is not a place but a person. She did not speak about Elon Musk directly until Priya asked, and when she did, she spoke carefully, without drama, without score settling, with the measured, honest affection of someone describing a country they once lived in and still think about and have made peace with never returning to. "He was the most awake person I had ever met," she said. "And also one of the most frightened. Those two things were not separate in him. The aliveness came from the fear. He moved so fast because standing still meant feeling how scared he was." "Did he know that about himself?" Priya asked. Camille considered this. "I think he knew it the way you know something you can't afford to look at directly," she said. "Sideways, in your peripheral vision, always there, never quite faced." A pause. "Until the night he called," Priya said quietly. When Camille looked at her hands around the mug. "Until the night he called," she agreed. She did not make it dramatic. She did not build to it with a speech or a preamble or any of the ceremony that the moment might have seemed to deserve. She simply reached into the pocket of her gray sweater and took out her phone. An ordinary phone, scratched at the corners from years of daily use, and she opened the recordings folder. The file was there, labeled simply with a date, September 28, 2008. She set the phone on the table between them. She looked at it for a moment, then she looked at Priya. "I'm going to read the transcript," she said. "I can't play the audio for anyone. That's his voice. That belongs to him. But the words are what matters, and the words I can give." Priya nodded. Camille unfolded a single piece of paper from her other pocket. It was worn at the folds. She had written the transcript out by hand. Not typed, handwritten, in the careful, deliberate print of someone for whom this act of transcription had been a form of reverence. She smoothed it on the table. She breathed once. She read, "Hey, it's me. I know you're probably watching. I know you probably saw it. I didn't know who else to call. I keep waiting to feel like I won. Like I should feel like I won. Everyone here is crying and cheering, and I'm standing in the corner, and all I can think about is, what if it had failed again? What if I'd lost it all? And I almost did. I almost did, Cam. I'm not calling to say anything important. I don't have anything important to say. I just needed to tell someone. I was scared. The whole time. Every single day for the last 5 years, I was terrified. And I couldn't say it to anyone, because the moment I say it, the whole thing falls apart. But you always knew anyway. You always knew. I think I built all of this because I couldn't figure out how to just be okay. Just be a person. I'd just be okay. I don't know if any of it was worth it. I don't know if I am. I wanted someone to know that. I'm sorry I couldn't be. I'm sorry I didn't know how to. Thank you for being the person I could call. Good night." Camille folded the paper. She placed it flat on the table with both hands pressed gently on top of it. The way you place your hands on something you are returning to the world after a long time of keeping it safe. The kitchen was very quiet. Orbit stirred in his rectangle of light, stretched one front paw forward with enormous, slow deliberateness, and went back to sleep. Outside, a child was laughing somewhere down the street. The unself-conscious, full-body laughter of someone very young for whom this moment is the best moment, and there is no reason to believe any moment will ever be less than this. Priya did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was careful and low. "Did he ever know you kept it?" "No," Camille said. "Nacho, do you think he'll hear it now?" Camille looked at the window. The Austin afternoon lay outside it. Gold, unhurried, ordinary in all the ways that ordinary is actually extraordinary if you remember to look. "I hope so," she said. "Not because I want anything from him. I haven't wanted anything from him for a long time. But I think he needs to hear himself say it. He needs to know that he said it, that it existed, that it was real." She paused. "We spend so much time watching him build things. I just wanted the world to know. He was also a man who stood in a corner on the best night of his life and called someone in the dark and said, 'I don't know if I am enough.' And I think that is the most human thing I have ever heard. I think that might be the most human thing there is." Priya clicked off the recorder. She looked down at her notebook. She had not written a single word. She had simply listened. She realized, sitting there in that warm kitchen with the afternoon light going slowly amber around them, that this was the first interview in her career where she had forgotten entirely to take notes, and that this was not a failure, but the most honest response she had ever had to anything. She looked up. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it in a way that had nothing to do with the article. Camille nodded once, simply, on the nod of a woman who has set something down after carrying it for a very long time and is feeling, not relief exactly, but the particular lightness of a weight honestly released. 3 days later, Priya's piece ran. At the end of it, after everything, after Renata Howell and Jerome Shaby, and Dr. Vivian Marsh and Marcus Webb, and the 36 hours of Elon's silence and the millions of people who had pressed play and felt the crack in themselves go suddenly warm. At the very end, Priya wrote this. "I asked Camille before I left if she had any regrets. She thought about it for a long time, long enough that I wondered if she was going to answer. Then she said, 'I regret that the world only gets to know him this way. Secondhand, through a voicemail, through me. He deserved to be known directly. But some people, the ones moving fastest, building most, caring the most, they don't stop long enough to be known directly. They leave traces instead, recordings, moments. The people who love them quietly. I was one of those people. This was one of those moments. I just thought it deserved to outlast the silence. Elon Musk posted nothing. He said nothing publicly, confirmed nothing, denied nothing. But on the morning Priya's final piece was published, early before most of the world was awake, a single transaction appeared in the public donation records of a Montana public school library fund. Anonymous, significant. Enough to keep a small-town library stocked with books for a generation. The donation was traced eventually by a journalist with time and patience and the particular instinct for the detail that changes everything. It had been made from a personal account. It had been made at 3:17 a.m. and attached to it, in the optional message field that most donors leave blank, were 4 words, just 4, for the girl there. Camille did not find out about the donation until 3 weeks later. Marcus called to tell her. His voice, when he did, had the particular quality of a person trying to remain composed while feeling something very large move through them. She listened. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she went to her refrigerator. She took down the photograph, the rocket, the launch pad, the impossible white column against the black sky, and she looked at the handwriting on the back. He was here once. She smiled, not a sad smile. Not the smile of grief or loss or the bittersweet particular ache of things that were and are not anymore. A full smile, warm and complete and entirely, quietly sure of itself. She put the photograph back. She smoothed it against the refrigerator door with 2 fingers. She picked up Orbit, who accepted this with the dignified tolerance of a cat who has long understood that sometimes humans need to hold something. She stood at the window. Below her, the ordinary street. Ordinary Thursday. An ordinary, beautiful, unremarkable world going about its ordinary business without any awareness of what had just moved through it like a current. Invisible, significant, permanently altering the temperature of something. A child chased a ball across the sidewalk. A woman walked a dog. A man sat on his porch in the morning light with a coffee mug and his face turned up toward the sky, the way people turn their faces toward warmth when they find it. Camille watched all of it. She breathed. She was. Without question or qualification or the need for anyone to confirm it, she was here. She had always been here. And now at last, so had he. And that is the story the world almost never got to know. A woman who stayed in the shadows for 16 years because she believed some things were too sacred to share. A man who stood in the corner on the greatest night of his life and called the one person who had ever truly known him. And 4 minutes and 12 seconds of audio that reminded millions of people, all at once, on the same Tuesday, that the most powerful among us are still just people, afraid in the dark, reaching for someone. Camille asked the world to listen with kindness. We hope you did. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your country, shoot your corner of the world in the comments below, because this story traveled far, and we want to know exactly how far it reached. And if this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or someone you lost, or something you have been carrying quietly for longer than you should have to, hit that like button. Not for us. Do it because every like tells the algorithm that kindness is worth spreading. That stories about real human feeling deserve to travel further than outrage does. And if you believe that, if you believe the world gets a little better when we remind each other that even the most powerful people are just frightened humans doing their best, then subscribe to this channel. Because that is exactly what we are here to do. One story at a time. The video you need to watch next is appearing on your screen right now. We promise. It is worth your time. We will see you there.